It's a Wednesday episode, an edition of Locked On Lions. Our buddy Brad Spielberger from PFF going to join us. And don't believe some of these hypes and don't believe some of this hype and rumors surrounding the Lions. I'll explain coming up.
You are Locked On Lions, your daily Detroit Lions podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
On a Wednesday, October the 12th into Thursday, October 13th, it's Matt Dery, and it's Locked On Lions on the Locked On Podcast Network. Indeed, your team every day. Thanks for joining us and making us your first listen each and every day right here on this very show. Lions on a bye week. I'm going to do a little practicing and send everybody home for a little while and to other places. I'm sure some of the guys will go visit some of their colleges and go to some games this weekend, then back at it next week in preparation for the 4-1 Cowboys, who may get Dak Prescott back for the Lions game next Sunday. He's not going to play, it doesn't sound like this week, when Dallas travels to Philly with Cooper Rush and company. Locked On Lions today, sponsored by BetterHelp. It's not a crisis line. It's not self-help. It's professional therapy done securely online. Available to people worldwide. And they have a special offer for my listeners. Get 10% off your first month at BetterHelp.com/LockedOn. Brad Spielberger going to join us from Pro Football Focus. We got some questions for Brad and the folks at PFF and grading. We got to ask about Aiden Hutchinson and his 80 grade from this past week. We'll do that coming up momentarily. Locked On Lions, of course, you can find us on YouTube, the Matt Dery Facebook fan page, Twitter at Dery Speaks, Dery Speaks, and Locked On Lions at Twitter. If you have not subscribed to the YouTube channel, please do. And again, thanks for making us your first listen today. All right, real fast before we get to Brad. I saw a report in The Athletic today where they made a suggestion that if things continue to spiral downward for the Lions and their defense, that Aaron Glenn could be replaced, and that Brian Flores, assistant coach for the Steelers, former head coach of the Dolphins, remember he sued the Dolphins and all this stuff, and Mike Tomlin has taken him in Pittsburgh, that Brian Flores could be a candidate to be the Lions' new defensive coordinator. I'm not ruling out that Brian Flores could eventually come to Detroit or that he would be a defensive coordinator somewhere else, but I pause anytime I see reports and rumors and suggestions because the Detroit Lions have a history with this franchise and organization as to not making moves like that and to not firing people. They're going to see this thing through with Dan Campbell and his staff and his guy, Aaron Glenn. If you honestly think in week 8, week 9 and the defense, you think Aaron Glenn's going to get fired during the season? You honestly think that? I don't even if the defense finishes 29th or 30th this year, you think they're going to make a change and fire him even in the offseason? I'm not buying it. I think they're seeing this through. I think they're going to use some injuries. Pascal, Romeo Quara, Tracy Walker. I think they're going to use that, not as an excuse, but they're definitely going to push that. This notion of, all right, we're already replacing Aaron Glenn with Brian Flores, I'm not buying it. I'm not. So I caution people when they read that. I like The Athletic, don't get me wrong. I think they do a great job, but I caution believing any of that right now, unless there's some sort of internal squabble or struggle with Dan Campbell and Aaron Glenn. But those two guys, last I checked, were pretty tight and close. We mentioned yesterday Maurice Alexander was waived by the team. The team's kick returner the last couple of weeks. He did clear waivers and today was brought back to the team's practice squad. All right, we're going to talk to Brad Spielberger, our guy from PFF. We're going to do that coming up next. First, though, I got to tell you, I should say now a word from our sponsor, BetterHelp. All right? It can be tough to train your brain to stay in problem-solving mode when faced with a challenge in life. Life is tough, especially these last few years, right? You want to find solutions. There's no better feeling than doing that. Well, I think a great call for you to make is to check out what BetterHelp has to do. If you're thinking it can do for you. If you're thinking about getting therapy, BetterHelp is a great option. It's convenient, accessible, affordable, and it's entirely online. You get matched with a therapist after filling out a brief survey, and you can switch therapists anytime. When you want to be a better problem solver, therapy can get you there. Visit their website at BetterHelp, BetterHelp.com/locked on today to get 10% off your first month. All right? It's simple. BetterHelp is fantastic. All right? They are great. H-E-L-P, betterhelp.com/locked-on. Get there today. All right, as promised today on a Wednesday edition of Locked On Lions, Lions on a bye at 1-4. Our buddy Brad Spielberger going to join us now from Pro Football Focus and PFF.com. What's up, Brad?
Hey, not much. How's it going?
Well, it's not going great. I'm good, but I mean, fan base is freaking out. I don't think anybody expected 1-4, but what are you seeing so far?
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, this may not be the most analytical kind of viewpoint perspective, but I've always been a big believer in you win in the trenches. I still think that is how football games are dictated, and I think all these injuries up front, particularly on the interior of the defensive line, obviously the O-line hasn't been super healthy either, but I think losing all the interior guys, Lebo and Uzurike obviously not playing, and then, Romeo Quara, Charles Harris on the edge, it's just they've not been able to really frustrate any opposing quarterbacks, and that's why they're giving up, the most points per game in the NFL.
It's interesting you brought that up because I wanted to bring this up, but you led me right to it. You guys gave Aiden Hutchinson an 80 grade this past Sunday, and it was a bit of a head scratcher. Not that we're bashing him and saying he's not playing well. I mean, he's playing okay, but you look at a player and you say, okay, there wasn't a single sack of the quarterback, Bailey Zappi, on Sunday, yet Hutchinson got an 80. How do you explain that, I guess?
Because he actually, when he had 3 sacks, he had a 59.7 pass rush grade, and because all of those were charted as unblocked pressures and unblocked sacks, in this past game, you saw, and I think it goes back to what I just said, because he's the only guy right now that I think opponents even fear with any fear at all. He was getting doubled, he was getting chipped, the protection was being slid to his side on a ton of the dropbacks for Bailey Zappi. So yes, he did not get any sacks. A couple pressures, but also just because of what was being thrown at him, he performed fairly well considering all the attention he was getting.
So if attention is being brought onto a player, that ups their grade based on even if they don't make a play, or like let's use the example, Brad, of the play where he got to Zappi, and Zappi made like one move to the right and ran right by him, and then I think completed a throw. I mean, is that still a win for Aiden that he got there and maybe he had to beat 2 guys?
So we first would chart if he beats his opponent, so just one-on-one against the offensive lineman, then a quarterback hurry, which would be in that case, we chart that as a quarterback hurry or a pressure. Obviously, you want to complete the actual sack there and get him down to the ground, but yeah, so he forced the quarterback to, get off move his base and change his pocket and move around. So it would be a pass rush win. You see those pass rush win rate, stuff like that. All those things would apply. Obviously, you want the stat to come with it, but he did fairly well considering everything that was thrown at him.
Brad Spielberger with us from Pro Football Focus, also handles a lot of their cap work. I want to ask Brad about that in a second, but you talked about 1-4 and you led with the defense, certainly. What else, when you look at that side of the ball? I know there's been some heat on Aaron Glenn and it's year 2, but besides up front, what about linebacker play in the secondary?
Yeah, I think everyone's favorite, the fan favorite, Malcolm Rodriguez has been a good player, but maybe Derek Barnes not quite playing to where you want to be, and a couple other of those guys in that second level not particularly playing great so far. And then obviously maybe the big story of last week is, Amani Oruwariye getting benched in that game after, some struggles so far, kind of looked like their top cornerback last year. I think that shows. Also, though, had all those interceptions, but, part of it may have been because he was getting targeted fairly often, and I think quarterbacks have identified him at times as a guy they can throw at. He had some good turnover luck and some good plays on the ball last season. Now with that not happening, it's kind of like this whole debate last year. We got a lot of flack for Trevon Diggs where, look, 11 interceptions is insane. No one's debating that. He also, per our charting, gave up over 1,100 yards last year. So it's kind of this this back and forth, this boom or bust type nature. He wasn't really getting any of the boom and a lot of the negative plays. So the back end is interesting too. I mean, you have guys like Will Harris changing positions. You obviously lose a really good player in Tracy Walker at safety for the season. So it's really a struggle right now on the back end as well.
I think the Oruwari a healthy scratch this past week, but I am going to place the blame on Pro Football Focus, you guys had him 99th out of 99 corners, and maybe that message got to Allen Park. I don't know.
That's a chicken or the egg situation. I don't know if we were first or or if they were seeing what we were seeing.
No question about it, Brad. You mentioned Rodriguez and grading linebackers. I think Anzalone had a pretty good game on Sunday and did all right grading wise. But when you take a look at rookie linebackers and where Rodriguez kind of sits right now, where does he place and how do you grade a guy like that as opposed to maybe a veteran in that spot?
Oh, he's the highest graded rookie linebacker. It's a really tough position early on in the career. We have a lot of guys, even highly billed first-round draft picks that come in. It is tough. You got guys like Patrick Queen, guys like Devin White, even guys that get a lot of acclaim in the league, Roquan Smith, and per our grading, those first couple years are not particularly highly graded players. And then, of course, some of those names have obviously gone on to become really good players. But there's so many responsibilities. I also think that has now become the position, and I think this might be interesting to monitor going forward. But as more and more teams play more and more too high safety looks, what that does is put more and more stress on off-ball linebackers. They have more responsibilities with less help down in the box. They have more coverage responsibilities, maybe on tight ends and running backs and shorter developing routes because they don't have that safety coming down and adding to the box count. So it puts so much stress. And then when they have to know all these things and know all their keys and all their gaps and be gap sound and all of these responsibilities, it's become a really tough position, not only to play outright, but also, of course, to learn your first year in the league.
What do you think of what Okuda's done so far this year?
A great bounce back year for him for sure. I think there have been some slip ups, but Aaron Glenn does like to play an aggressive style, a little bit more zone than, he originally was a lot of man coverage, and Okuda was, drafted third overall to be kind of that bump and run and a guy that can press up on a number one receiver and handle those responsibilities. I think it was a bit of a struggle at first. I think you also just don't have the guys elsewhere. So they have kind of become a little bit more of an off and zone type team, but he's now, I think, showing some of the flashes of why he was that highly touted coming out. I mean, the physical tools are obvious. His change of direction, I think, has been phenomenal. I think stuff like that is what, an Achilles and those lower body injuries can really, impact. And I think you're seeing a lot of positive signs there for sure.
Brad Spielberger with us. I want to ask him about the defense and also the Lions cap situation, because obviously when you lose, fans hit us up on social media and ask, well, what can they do? Can they sign this player? Can they sign that player? But again, you have to have the money and the cap space to do that. We will do that coming up next. I want to tell you, though, about our friends at BetOnline.net, your number one source for football betting info this season. Find all the latest player developments, team matchups, news, podcasts, everything in depth that you need, articles, analysis, and every game that you can find, including tomorrow's thriller, Washington and the Bears. Of course, MLB right now, the playoffs are heating up. We're into the division series. Fastest and easiest way to check in on all your favorite games and events, including the MLB playoffs, MMA, boxing, and golf, is BetOnline. It is simple. Get the app on your phone or even go to the website. Head to betonline.net, or like I said, use that mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, they're the best. They got all the spreads and everything's updated all the time at BetOnline, where the game starts. Our buddy from PFF, Brad Spielberger, with us. Again, got to give a shout out to Dave Salfaro, of course, for always hooking us up with Brad and the crew over there. You've had some, our boy Eric Eager's gone, Mr. Lions. Who's picking up the Honolulu blue and silver slack now on the PFF staff?
Yeah, he was the official Restore the Roar champion of the company, I think. I would give Dave Salfaro probably the next man up. The Michigan man in him can't stop supporting his guy, Aiden Hutchinson, no matter what.
Yes, no question about it. There's no Hutchinson slander when you talk to Dave, of course, after he set up that big 17-part series on Hutchinson over the summer. But I digress. Tell me about, all right, offensively, Jared Goff obviously did not grade out well this past week, but all in all, how would you rate his performance so far?
I think we kind of know what he is, and he's a very talented passer of the football. He has incredible, arm talent and ability, but he's limited, right? And I think a coach like Bill Belichick has kind of owned him his entire career, has truly just put him in a pretzel because he is not mobile really to any degree in the pocket. And then also he struggles beyond his first read. I mean, he's not a guy that's going to sit back there and comfortably go through a progression and be comfortable doing a lot of different things. It's more of a, people used to joke, I think it was taken a little bit too far that, Sean McVay was in his headset telling him where to throw the football. I don't know if it went that far, but I think if you scheme things open for him, he can deliver a strike. He can throw any throw you want to throw. But in terms of, once things get complicated, once things get difficult, we've seen him oftentimes where when you look at teams that show a single high look and then rotate into two high, or start with a two high safety look and rotate into single high, he's one of the worst quarterbacks in the NFL in grading that, where they mix their coverage pre and post snap. So that is who Jared Goff is. Like I said, he went first overall for the tools. Everything else that comes with quarterback play has kind of always been a struggle.
Interesting, too, some of the highest graded guys over the first 5 games have been the running backs, whether it was DeAndre Swift when healthy, and you guys seem to love Jamal Williams and what he's doing, right?
Yeah, I mean, leading the NFL in touchdowns, can't argue with that. A little bit more one-dimensional than Swift, but I think just a great one-cut, get-upfield, north-south runner. Behind that offensive line that is currently top 5 right now in yards before contact per rushing attempt, even with some of their injuries. That's a guy you want, a guy that just gets north and south and just gets you 4 or 5 yards, a clip.
All right, so, the bye this week, Dallas and Miami. Who knows who's going to be quarterbacking the Dolphins in a few weeks when they're here, and then Green Bay. Not the best schedule right now. Certainly the Lions did not take advantage of having Seattle at home, and then this past weekend, that was a very beatable Patriots team. But looking ahead, can they get this thing kind of turned around? And what do you think of their next 3 opponents?
They need to, right? I mean, it's becoming crunch time here, and it's obviously getting to a territory where you can't start, 1-5, 1-6, 1-7. No one thought this was going to be a Super Bowl contender necessarily, but obviously, we joke around a lot of buzz. A team that maybe could go 500 or get in that mix. It's not the easiest schedule. I would say that, with Dallas, you would hope your tackles and Taylor Decker and Penei Sewell can hold up against a Micah Parsons, against a DeMarcus Lawrence, and their interior is not a weakness, but it's not really a strength. So if you can contain their edge defenders, I think you can move the football down the field. And then, Miami has not really done well as a pass rush unit at all. Got to keep an eye on Byron Jones and Xavier Howard, their top 2 cornerbacks there. Could make a huge difference whether they play or not. And then, like you said, who knows who's going to be a quarterback for either of those teams? But, is it going to be Dak Prescott? Is it going to be Cooper Rush? And then is it going to be Tua Tagovailoa? Is it going to be Teddy Bridgewater or Skylar Thompson? Whether they catch a break or not, like you just said, Bailey Zappi still hung 29 on them, and they got shut out. So you can't take anything for granted, but you have to look at every game as fairly winnable, going forward.
What about these Dan Campbell decisions, all the fourth down, the going for it? I kind of compared it on Tuesday to what Josh McDaniels did on Monday night, electing not to kick. Sounds like we're not going to use our kicker. Seems like some coaches, and ours included here, sometimes that kicker doesn't even get a thought that he's going to enter the field. What do you think about that in 2022 and how these coaches are utilizing these kickers, where they're basically telling them not even to come out on the field?
Yeah, I would say that in my opinion, context of your roster actually does matter a ton. And I'm sure Lions fans do not want to hear this and are sick of hearing this. But if you're a lesser talented team, you kind of do want to play the variance game. You want to take risks. And we know football is so random. There are so many one-score games. We talk about parity a lot and how, even the worst team is pretty close to the best team relative to other sports and stuff like that. And so the way you can capitalize and take advantage is some of these higher variance, risky operations, but there is obviously the potential for it to backfire. And if it doesn't work over an extended period of time or a couple, big high leverage moments in a number of games, then you can be 1-4 and kind of looking on the barrel of a tough, situation going forward. So I would still advocate for it because, that is the path forward to maybe getting a couple lucky wins or, pulling something out of your hat. It just unfortunately has not gone his way at all this year so far.
So, Brad, we see a team like Cleveland go out and get Deion Jones from the Falcons. And, then, of course, 3 or 4 tweets in, it's my Twitter with, why didn't the Lions go get him? And I'm trying to explain to fans that, look, you can't, with the amount of money that the Lions have, you can't you can't trade for Deion Jones and sign Sue or a free agent, Odell back, let's go get Odell. Tell the fans how that works and where the Lions sit cap-wise right now, if they, if there are fans that want to go get a veteran player or trade for a player to kind of turn this thing around.
Right now, they only have about $2.5 million in cap space. So if they wanted to go out and make a move like that, you probably have to restructure a deal, maybe push some cap down the line on a guy like a Taylor Decker. You probably don't want to do that with Jared Goff, obviously, if you don't know what you're going to do with him going forward. So it would take some, other maneuvering. I think it's possible, like you said, though, probably not several moves, maybe one or two moves here or there. I would go back to interior defensive line again. I wouldn't touch the offense. They also put up 45 points with, their receiver, their third, fourth, and fifth receiver out there.
Yeah,
You'll get DeAndre Swift back. You'll get Amon-Ra St. Brown 100% healthy. Jamison Williams obviously will enter the fold at some point, and if he's anything like the rest of this rookie class, he could make an impact from day one. So I would focus on defense. I don't think it's the worst idea. I mean, assigning a Ndamukong Suh or, seeing if, I don't know, just one name, but, Derek Brown in Carolina, their former first-round pick, are they going to kind of tear everything down and start over? I'd at least be making those phone calls. I mean, it's a talented nose tackle in Carolina. So, make some phone calls, see what's out there. But, yeah, you can't go nuts and break the bank and make a bunch of big moves. You just don't really have the cap space right now.
Yeah, they already did a restructure with Decker once, Brockers earlier. There's only so many of those guys that you have that you can do that with. Brad, always love talking to you. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Brad Spielberger with us, PFF analyst, cap guru, and everything at Pro Football Focus. Appreciate his time on a bye-week Wednesday right here on Locked On Lions.